Thank you, Sana. Thank you very much, Sana. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ambika Adhikari in the Planning Division, Community Development Department. With me are my colleagues, Ravi Aaron, Jacob Payne, and also Brenda Clark, and a host of other staff in addition to Sana. Thank you for making time to come to the meeting today. It's very important. We'll be spending the first 12, 15 minutes just to give you an outline and description of what we're trying to do in the Tempe Tomorrow General Plan, so that you are kind of up to date on how your input is going to be valuable. Many of you probably could be new in this particular event. So we wanted to give you a very brief highlight of this one. So today is a community open house. Robbie, if we can go to the next slide, please. Today we'll cover what the general plan is. We call it Tempe Tomorrow, General Plan 2050. We'll tell you about the process, how it is being developed, and what we've heard from the people so far, and what are the next steps so that you can give us your feedback. Here is a very high level, a little hard to read timeline, but the long and short of it is it's almost like a 2-year long project. We started in February 2022. We're kind of halfway through public consultation process. Today is one of those public meetings that we're having. I'll go into a little more detail about the types of the other meetings in the coming slides. And then we'll continue to have meetings and take the process to the council sometime in August, September this year. And then next year in March, in the election time, because the state law requires that the general plan also gets approved by the citizen, we'll take it to the vote. So February, March 2022 to March 2024, 2 years. Next one. So what will the Tempe Tomorrow General Plan 2050 cover? This is the really high level, policy level document of the city that deals with the growth and development in the city. This is really an overarching policy document that guides other documents and plans and what we do in terms of the physical growth. But most importantly, it is something that really reflects the community vision. People like yourself who come to the meeting, many different commissions and boards and technical advisory group and council and everyone, how they envision the city to grow in the coming 30 years. And then it also guides us on many different detailed elements like infrastructure, land use, economic development, parks, recreation, and environment. Here is a visual that really helps. It's a kind of a long document, maybe about 250 pages. The general plan kind of becomes the basis for the master plan that we developed. The general plan lasts 10 years. The state law requires that every 10 years we update the general plan. Once we do that, the master plan for the city, like in the water, transportation, infrastructure, all of that is developed based on the vision of the general plan. And then there are many detailed plans that helps us to implement the vision and the strategies and the objective of the general plan. Those examples are character area plans that many of you know, some specific plan, pre-development area plans, and so on. And at the end, the actual implementation sometimes is also done through a legal document, like the zoning ordinance and many other programs and projects, and the ordinance that we develop in the city. So sometimes it's easier to see what a general plan is not. So by process of elimination, of course, it's not a specific plan. It's not a legal instrument. It's not a master plan. It's not a capital improvement plan. And it is something that's a live document that gets amended and changed and updated in between. Even within those 10 years, there could be updates into the general plan, amendment to the general plan. Now, the general plan, typically, the state requires by the size of the city. For Tempe, there's something like 26 different elements of the general plan, like the land use, community design, and transit. What we do for the sake of clarity, we organize all of those different elements that are required by the state statute into different chapters that are kind of coherent. So the first chapter is going to be land use and development chapter. It will have 6 different or 5 different elements within that. Then there will be economic development chapter, circulation chapter that talks about transportation and so on. So all those elements are organized very coherently within the different chapters. The other chapters are environment and conservation, open space recreation, public facilities and services. You see all these elements here being listed with an asterisk. All of these are required by the state statute. The state law says that the city of our size, more than 50,000 people, will need to have those kind of elements. There are also a few optional elements for the sake of the clarity that we put. We typically put things like historic preservation, economic development, and even climate change, public art and cultural amenities may not be strictly required per se, but it's important for the city to have those elements. So there are some optional elements. So altogether 6 chapters and 26 different elements in the general plan. Okay, so how it is being developed? The process of it is obviously, it's an update. So we base that development into the existing plan, which is the General Plan 2040, which was approved by the voters in 2014. And then the council has appointed a community working group, which is one of the regular boards and commission, to really specialize and focus on the general plan. We also have a technically advisory groups, which have representatives from all boards and commissions and partners and all the interdepartmental staff. More importantly, input from community at large, like from these kind of meetings, public meetings. Today's is a second meeting. And then suggestion that you feel free to tell us anytime. And then obviously the council also guides us. Then we continue to do online surveys. We'll have a third survey live sometime today. And then we continue to do specialized and regular meetings that we do with the public, like this one. And so we continue to get the feedback and input all the way until the plan is adopted. Hopefully by August and September of this month, people can free to tell us how to do it by phone, by email, at the meetings, whichever way that they can tell us. We continue to address those comments and inputs. Sometimes we get conflicting inputs. Sometimes we get very detailed inputs. We try to create a balance. This is a very high level visionary plan. Just the name suggests it's general. So we listen to you for anything that you want to say, but the plan itself is going to be on a high level vision that's in some ways very kind of flexible to guide the other documents. Okay, and once it is ready, the draft will be available to you for even more detailed feedback. The first draft will be available to you in May. And like I said, it will go, if everything goes right, it will go to the council and vote eventually. Okay, so I'm going to ask my colleague, Robbie Aaron, to discuss a little more about the input that we have got so far and what your feedback should look like. Robbie?
Thank you, Ambika. As Ambika said, I'm going to go quick through the review of public input to date and where we go from here as far as public input goes. So back in June of summer of 2022, so last year, about 6 months ago, we had a kickoff survey that had 10 questions. We got 356 responses from that survey. And that went over the community's vision for 2050. It had preferences of ranking of preferences and element rankings as far as what people thought the most important elements of the general plan were. After that, we went through that feedback, and then that took us a couple months to kind of start the actual process. And we had our first in-person meeting on October 26th at the Legoland Discovery Center, Arizona Mills. This particular meeting was done by a consultant that we hired that brought in Lego and other found objects to help people create a vision of what they want to see in the city with those objects. And they did a really great job. We had 153 attendees and got a lot of feedback. That also had a survey that was open from October 21st to November 9th. And through that survey, we got 115 responses. Some of the common themes that we heard at through that process were blue zones, accessibility. We heard a lot about walkability, transit, mixed use, public art. We heard a lot about renewable energy and sustainability, trees, more shade, a mix of housing types, providing affordable housing, using desert plants that are native to the Sonoran Desert, and just providing an overall welcoming community. As Mbika stated, we also have a community working group. This community working group, we've met for the past 6 months, multiple times. We meet the first Tuesday of every month. That's an open public meeting. It's held at the library. So if you wanted to attend that, you are able to attend that and see how that works. This board is council appointed. There are currently 17 members that represent residents, businesses, institutions, and other professionals. It's also a hybrid meeting. So there is a Zoom link for it that can be found on the city's website. And we've had a couple additional meetings just to make sure that we stay on track. We're currently working with them, and they've provided us a lot of valuable input that will get inserted into the plan. Another group that we have is our technical advisory group. This group is made up of staff from the city, from the various departments of the city. It's also made up of board and commission members from various boards and commissions throughout the city, and then other partner organizations that we work regularly with throughout the development process or other processes that we take through that happen in the city. So this has 65 to 70 members. They provide very detailed and technical input to us about different parts of the plan, whether it's transportation or sustainability. And this meets on the first and third Tuesdays of each month. Generally speaking, this is not a public meeting like the CWG is, but we would be happy to tell you more about the technical advisory group. So what are we asking today? So today's meeting serves 3 purposes. It informs the general plan, its content and processes. It is to gather more input, your input on general plan elements, and also to receive feedback on some of the input that we've already received from community members and through the other meetings and surveys that I just went over. Today, we're having an open house tonight if you want to attend that, but we're going to be here to answer questions. You can give ideas, ask questions, make suggestions for the future of Tempe. We'll be writing all this down, and it's also to review the comments of peers and the community, as I said. So with that, our next steps, we just want to go over next steps too. So upcoming outreach, we will be at Arts in the Park. So one of your neighborhood parks might be having Arts in the Park. If they are, we will be at that throughout the next few weeks. We're going to be holding various stakeholder focus groups, whether that's with our development community, nonprofit organizations, and other businesses. We'll have a community meeting in the spring to kind of get more feedback to make sure that we're on the right track. And then we'll also have a community meeting to review the draft of the general plan. And that, as Mbika said, that is scheduled for May of this year. These are staff contacts. As Mbika said, feel free to reach out to us at any time, whether it's Mbika, myself, Robbie, my colleague Jacob, and then our 2 wonderful neighborhood services people that help us out so much. So with that, Shauna, we can go ahead and open it up to questions. So I'll turn it back over to Shauna.
Okay, thank you, Robbie. So there's a couple ways you can ask questions. We have a chat box, which I put the link to the survey in, where you can ask questions and/or you can raise your hand, and we're happy to take questions about the general plan.
Shauna,
Yes, Mbika, go ahead.
if there are no other questions at this point, when people are thinking about the questions, maybe Ryan or anyone from the staff, if we have missed anything, if you wanted to kind of add very brief comments, we can do that too. And I also wanted to let everyone know that we do have a website, and those emails that were shown to you. I think we see a question now.
Yeah, there's a question, then I've got someone else that will call on in a minute here. So, yeah, the one question in the chat is, will street repairs be part of the general plan, or is it only for new plans?
Robert, anyone from transportation? Otherwise, we'll respond to that. Okay. I can respond to that. Like I said, the general plan is a really high level vision. It has goals, objective, and strategies. So it doesn't really go into the details. All it says is do this kind of transportation system, multimodal, and also be aware that the maintenance is very important. But if you do have a specific maintenance question, you can let us know, and then we can take it to our transportation people. We do have a transportation master plan that comes after the general plan that will go into a little more detail with the kind of thing that you're talking about, if that helps.
And I'll put in the chat as well the link to the streets website. Kim, if you want to go ahead with your question.
I've got a couple of them. These common themes are pretty general, and I'm wondering on quite a few of them if it would be appropriate in the general plan to make some reference to educating the general community, including visitors, on some of the reasons that we have these proponents in the general plan. Like, why are we focused on desert plants and historic preservation, and why some of these things are important to us? So, you know, like maybe educational spaces that aren't necessarily connected to an institution, such as, you know, a school or that type of thing. Would that be appropriate for the general plan?
Okay, so thank you for that question. The general plan, there's a requirement by the state statutes and laws and what topic it has to cover. It does cover the education in general, like the schooling and the university and all that is part of what we are in. But if you're talking about some of the topics, why do we do that in the general plan? That is something that we do definitely write in the general plan preambles and introduction, why these things are important. Like you gave an example of historic preservation. We actually do that as a part of the general plan. But as the name suggests, what we do is what is important to give a guidance in the vision for 2050 horizon on the topic that relate to the growth and development. So we kind of stick to the high level, but the topic that you said is something that we do explain. And then there's also an appendix that provides a little more detail on why some of the things are the way that we write. So your question is very valid, but I just wanted to kind of define the scope of the general plan and where that kind of information is available. It is going to be there.
I'm not sure you understand, and I'm probably not explaining it very well. I'm not speaking about just explaining the general plan. I'm talking about like education zones within the community. So there might be space in, because I'm on the Desert Conservation Commission, there might be space in the preserve that we help educate people on, you know, the importance of having desert plants, the water conservation, you know, that there might be spaces in different areas that we want to incorporate in our community. So it's not necessarily explaining the general plan so much as it is explaining some of these things that we find important, and that's why they were put in the general plan. I mean, not saying that's why we put them in there, but explaining the importance of them.
I got it. I got it. Thank you
Ambika,
for that. Yeah.
I think I understand what Kim is getting at. And I think, it's definitely something that we can include as a strategy to help people understand why these things are important to us, to include. And I think what she's saying is, sometimes you go to like the botanical garden or maybe the Boyce Thompson Arboretum, and there's a plaque that says, you might see this cactus, and here's what the saguaro cactus does and how it operates in this environment. So it's something to that effect that provides an educational opportunity for like maybe in the front of the flour mill, hey, this is the Hayden flour mill. Here's why it's important to us. And here's what it means to this city and how long it's been here, and those kinds of educational opportunities. And I think that's something that we can provide, when we're talking about preservation, or even in some of our sustainability guidelines, or in open space of providing, educational opportunities throughout the areas to show why these things are important to us. I think it's something we can definitely include as a goal in the general plan. Is that kind of what you were thinking, Kim?
On a smaller scale, yes. I was
Yeah.
thinking a little bit larger scale, like even some places, like if you like the botanical gardens or something like that, there might be a Ramada that has information,
Sure.
On it that's, shows the importance, why Tempe feels something is important in that area. So a little bit larger, maybe in a scope when you're thinking of a 2050 plan than just individual signage on plants.
Well, yeah, that was like, I think an easy example for me
But
to
yeah.
think of, but almost to like a resource center type of place, you can go to almost, within the Papago Park, there's like a center that you can go to learn about Papago Park as a whole.
Exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly what I mean. So
Okay.
yes, you're definitely on the right track.
Okay.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And then Lewis had a question about where to view the current general plan. So I did put that link in the chat, but it's just at tempe.gov/general plan. You can see the current one that's been adopted. So then the next question is, what percentage of requests each year to modify or override the general plan for specific projects are accepted or denied?
Robbie, I think you had a table with that kind of info.
I do. If Shauna, can we go to the next question so I can pull that information real quick?
Yeah, so we'll go to the next question, come right back to that one. Does the plan include reducing car dependence, i.e. how will the plan create a city where fewer residents need a car for daily activities?
I can talk about that briefly. This is something that comes all the time, both at the community working group and technical advisory groups and the community meetings. Tempe does have a 20-minute city vision. In other words, to reduce the dependence on the car, to be able to access all your daily amenities like school and shopping and everything within 20 minutes by transit ride and bike. And the transportation department is very keen on those kind of things. We understand that cars are also important in some areas, but in the long run, looking at 2050, there is also a lot of emphasis on transit and bike and walkability. Yes, so your point is there are lots of places in the plan where we talk about those kind of things for sustainability, but balancing it for the need to continue cars in some areas and reduce whenever we can.
Could I expand briefly on that too? I don't want to speak for
Please.
Robert if he's there. This is Suparna. I'm also with planning. But because I was part of that study, there are so many different studies that have been completed or we are undergoing currently in the city. One of the big ones is the mobility hub study, and that was a citywide, and And some of the points that you just brought up is part of that study. And a lot of these other studies that have been completed or are even contemplated in the future, in our general plan, there would be an implementation category of a chapter where a lot of these by reference, these documents would be available by reference so that we are not repeating the same information. But some of these go into a lot more detail at that level for each of those different items, such as the walkability, livability item that you just brought up. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thanks, Suparna.
Robbie, are you ready, or you want me to go to the next question?
Jacob actually has the information.
Okay. So
Yeah,
this was referring to what amendments were passed. Go ahead.
Gotcha. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. I'm Jacob Payne. I'm also with Long Range Planning. So let me pull up this graphic. So this is a table that we created for one of our meetings with our community group because they asked the same question about amendments to the general plan. So we don't have the metrics on how many of them have been denied. Maybe Suparna or somebody in current planning might have an idea, but it's not often. But here's a makeup of how many have been approved over the lifetime of the general plan 2040
We're not
after its
seeing.
adoption in 2014.
Oh, there we go. Okay. There was a delay, sorry, in the screen.
Can everybody see the table now?
Yes, I can. And if you want me to jump in, by the time we go to a public hearing for general plan amendments, you won't see obviously the denial in terms of approval or denial. But in the initial stage, when an applicant approaches the city for a general plan amendment, before they even spend the money in application and other things to apply for their general plan amendment, there are some discussions that happen with the preliminary review of those applications to see whether we would support it or not. So a lot of the ones that you don't see, and there may have been an application or an inquiry like, if I want to do this, would you support a general plan amendment? And if it is not appropriate, we would at least tell the applicant in advance, and so they don't apply for that. So the ones that you see on the screen here are the ones that actually was okay to go forward with because it was appropriate application. We do get regular questions. We have a planner on call every day, and we get a lot of questions about whether I want to do this thing in this piece of property. Would you support this? And we would look through the whole issue and in context to where they're proposing and what kind of, and if it's not supportable, we would tell them in advance so they're not going through the process just to learn about a denial. If that answers your question about the denials.
Thank you, Suparna. So then our next question is, does the plan address future development and expansion of public access areas on Tempe Town Lake, such as lakeside strolling walkways, restaurants, and cafes?
There's someone from Parks and Recreation, otherwise I can respond to that.
Hey, Amika, it's Craig Hayton with Community Services. I can start and certainly feel free to add any additional. From the Parks and Recreation side, there's a couple pieces and answers to this question. First, we have alongside the general plan, we have a recently completed Parks and Recreation Master Plan from 2021 that looks at broadening recreation as well as addressing infrastructure that we currently have within the system. So we certainly want to make sure that we're providing additional recreational opportunities within our system, but more specific to the Tempe Town Lake and the Rio Salado Park areas that we're managing. we have a completed Rio Salado master plan. And part of our implementation of that plan is to focus on some of the underdeveloped areas, specifically on the north side of the town lake between the Elmore Bridge going from west to east to the marina. So we will embark on a planning effort to preliminary design that space in the next year or so. But at this point, that's where we're mostly focused on for the Tempe Town Lake. I hope that helps answer questions from the public park space perspective, but we also know that there's really an intersection with private property around the town lake as well, and some other community development projects that are really helping support not just, I guess, opportunities to eat and be outside, but also that has some recreation components to it too.
Thank you, Craig. And I saw that Sana had just put the online version of the Park and Recreation Master Plan if anyone wants to go into the detail. If there are any follow-up questions, you can ask us.
And I also included the Rio Salado master plan in there as well. So can you define blue zones? What are those?
I can talk to that very briefly. So the blue zones are kind of a concept about a geographical area which promote a healthy living by letting you walk, eat fresh food, have a clean air, have places to exercise. And they give examples of places like Okinawa in Japan or Loma Linda in California, and some places in Italy where people live very long and healthy life. And that's a concept that was actually derived by some individuals, but now it's become pretty well known in the planning community. So those concepts, basically many things that we do in terms of park recreation, active transportation like bikes, walking, shade, clean air, all of that combined into that thought of blue zones.
Thank you, Ambika. And we appreciate all the comments in the chat. Those will be saved and included as part of our public comment. I'm just going to be pulling up the questions that we can get answers from our group here. So the next one is the issue of shade addressed specifically in the general plan? And some of this you just were talking about, Ambika. Has there been discussion about building shade structures, solar panels over sidewalks and streets?
Thanks, Sana. I will tackle that in the beginning and my colleagues can probably add in. Shade has been one of the central elements in the general plan and any other plans that we do. So it is talked about in the park and recreation, it's talked about in the land use side. It's also talked about the sustainability and the conservation chapter, all those chapters that we described in the beginning. So it's important for biking, it's important for walking, it's important for anything. So this is something that we're very aware. So in terms of the policy level, we do talk about shade, even shade equity. Then your question about covering the streets and sidewalks with the solar panels and so on, this is a little more detailed. Oftentimes when you go to design guidelines or the building sites, we do encourage that because the city of Tempe is also in the process of contemplating the adoption of the International Green Construction Code. Maybe Suparna can talk about that also. That would actually promote the use of any renewable energy, including the solar panels. So those are kind of detailed level questions. And what happens is in the general plan, we write the goals and policies to promote that. And in the next level, when we go to like a transportation master plan or other infrastructure plan, then we also talk about the way that we build things and put the solar panels. So this is very much intended in the general plan.
Okay, and then we did bring back up this image with the common themes we've been hearing so far. Did anyone else have a specific question we can help you out with?
Shauna, you might have already addressed this, and I apologize. I came late to the meeting. What's the definition of a blue zone?
Oh, Robert, I just talked about the blue zones.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay, I can do it in 2 sentences. It's kind of a concept that's been floating around the last 7-8 years, propagated by some individuals, but now it's become pretty common in the planning arenas, some healthy geographical areas that really promote healthy living so people can live long and healthy lives. That includes many things we talk about, sustainability and active recreation and so on. And good examples are given for Okinawa, Loma Linda, and places in Italy and other places of the blue zones. So it's a concept that was discussed in the beginning of this general plan development process. And it's basically a healthy living where it allows people to live long and healthy lives. And it's, you know, shade and walkability and bike, all of them are part of it, and clean air.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, the next question asked, how is diversity and inclusion addressed in these theme areas? For instance, for our aging residents, people with physical or psychiatric disabilities, other languages and cultures.
If there is someone from human services to talk about it, or community services, otherwise we can respond to that. Okay.
And
Hearing none- Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Craig Hayden. I can address from a Parks and Rec perspective with our master plan. We looked at one of our key guiding principles was inclusion, really working on how do parks and recreation spaces and open spaces within the city really help support not just being welcoming environments, but really building that sense of belonging. So that's a focus on our end. We're following that up with an equity study that would help not just identify where future amenities could go from a recreational need, but really looking at it more from an equity lens of where things are most necessary. So that's, I know, a very small portion of that. And I know arts and culture has a very significant focus on equity inclusion, as well as the Tempe Library as well. So just kind of a sneak peek of what we're working on.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you,
And
Craig.
this is Brianne. I can speak from the sustainability and resilience perspective on that one.
Please.
So very similar to what Craig mentioned taking place in parks is when sustainability and resilience is doing projects, developing policy. For instance, when we are deciding where to put some green infrastructure or additional shade, natural shade, we are looking at equity maps. We're looking at where the most vulnerable population is to extreme heat and where that funding and those projects should be prioritized. So I would say every department has their way of how they're implementing these common themes that lend itself to diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Brianne. So in addition to that, this is something, again, it cuts across like sustainability across the general plan. In the land use community design element, in the housing element, many other elements. Also, we talk about equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and also ADA. Again, because it's a high-level plan, we do discuss it and promote it. And the other detailed plans take over, like the zoning ordinance has ADA requirements and so on. So hope this answers your question. Feel free to follow up.
Okay, so next question. Does the plan include intercity transportation? When Amtrak proposed an expansion the last few years, one proposed route was between Phoenix and Tucson. Presumably, this would include a stop in Tempe.
Is there someone from transportation, Sana? Otherwise, we can.
Robert's
Yeah, I'm
on.
here.
Yeah, Robert, please.
I'm here. Yes. Yeah, and the expansion of the Amtrak service between Tucson, Phoenix, and there will be a stop in Tempe. The programming part of that investment phase is not until after 2030. So there's still some time that before that service can get started. But yes, it will add a service. Well, the plan is to add a service between Phoenix that will have a stop in Tempe all the way to Tucson, but also the service will also include Tucson all the way to Los Angeles. Not happening yet, though. Thank you.
Okay, and then the next question is asking if community safety is a component of the 2050 plan.
So and I can initiate that, and if there's someone who wants to give detail, that will be welcome. We do have one of the elements in the plan that's called public facilities and public safety, including community safety. And we also align the general plan with the council priorities and vision. And council, of course, it talks about safe and secure communities. So we do have a public safety element, including the fire response time, police access, the way that the transportation works to provide safety, to including the design criteria for surveillance and making safe areas in terms of design. So that's something that we kind of tackle briefly on high level. If there are other people who want to expand that, please go ahead.
Okay, not hearing from anyone, we'll move on to the next question. And Louis, I can follow up with you on getting those sent to you, but a question on action at the old mill. I don't know if you guys have an update on that specific project. And tied to that, how Tempe and ASU will develop and protect archaeological sites in the old creamery area and others that may be discovered in the future.
Maybe Robbie, Jack?
I can
You can talk
tackle
about
the-
the Creamery Brands area, if that's what's being asked. The discovery was, the treatment for the discovery and how it will be treated as proposed by the 4 tribes and SRPMIC. Their recommendation will be followed. The bottom line is they wanted to keep it in place, not to excavate it, not to expose it anywhere, but to keep it in place, but build the memorial as part of the 8th Street streetscape and multi-use path project for the city, which will be which is being redesigned at the moment. That's what we're trying to do, and whatever we need, there is finding for us on some of these projects that we do. We actually have set aside funding for to support whatever SRPMIC and the 4 tribes would like in the process to preserve them. Thank you.
And I can just weigh in on what's happening at the Hayden Flour Mill. This is Zach Lechner, Historic Preservation Officer. So Robert, thanks for weighing in on.
Sorry, I didn't know you were there.
No, that's okay. That's actually more information that I had about the 8th Street. So I appreciate you weighing in on that. In terms of the Hayden Flour Mill and silos, we are working, I say we as the city, specifically our economic development department, in completing a development agreement with a developer to come onto that site and redevelop it. Part of the the plan and the requirements of that development agreement are very clearly going to ensure the preservation and, in fact, in some respects, restoration of the mill, as well as the silos themselves. So I think it's going to be a great project from a historic preservation standpoint, also just from a economic and just cultural standpoint, because it'll be a way to really shine a light on what is arguably one of the more distinctive elements of the city of Tempe's landscape. And then, will also be an opportunity to, as they say, activate that area of Mill Avenue, which has been a tad neglected, shall we say, since the mill went out of service, some 25 years ago. So I think it will really, help kind of knit together the economic vibrancy already, existing, as we know, along Mill Avenue, while also, keeping, good preservation principles in mind when it comes to those, irreplaceable historic structures.
Thank you. Next question, where does the protection of desert landform view sheds valued by SRPMIC and does it connect to our desert heritage play into development planning?
Craig, do you want to talk about that from the park and recreation perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Ibika. I can touch on it briefly in the fact that we will be undertaking a preserves management plan for both Hayden Butte and Papago this year. We anticipate it would start sometime later in the spring. And with that, that's going to be an important consideration of just how we manage both the conservation of really important desert spaces, but also provide some opportunities for connection within that. So I don't necessarily have an answer other than saying, if you're interested in that, please keep your eye out for an opportunity to be engaged with a desert preserves management plan process that will work through with Kim and the Desert Conservation Commission, as well as the 4 Southern Tribes, Dr. Lechner's office and other folks within the city. So we anticipate that being a really pivotal document for us as we look at managing those important spaces wisely moving forward.
I'll just add too in the historic, thanks Greg, I'll just add with, in the historic preservation office, we're obviously concerned about those things as well. I mean, in terms of maintaining and preserving the city's cultural resources, really the historic preservation office is the, acts as the tribal liaison. And so, when it comes to, things like, view sheds, just for example, to pick the most identifiable feature in Tempe, Tempe Butte, that's something that, we definitely want to be and have been in conversation with the tribes about. For example, my predecessor in the historic preservation officer role had been instrumental in helping to remove I believe the radio antenna or towers from Tempe Butte, because that Tempe Butte is a traditional cultural property for the 4 Southern Tribes of Arizona. And so, that in particular was seen as a, real, kind of eyesore to the Butte. And so, we'll continue to work with the tribes in particular, as well as the community on those types of issues.
Okay,
Great,
thank you. Oh, Abika, did you have more to add?
No, these are very good responses. And I also wanted to let everyone know that we do have the Tempe Butte Preservation Plan that's available online. There's also that view shade planning element from 3rd and Mill that is in effect. So we do use that in terms of its visibility from certain important points. When the Tempe Town Lake was developed, some of the plans were there. So the general plan and the high level will talk about it. But like Craig and Jack mentioned, the details are in the historic preservation and also the creation and other plans. Yes, Anna.
Thank you. So next question, will the 2050 plan address long-term housing affordability and accessibility and encourage residential units of varying types? The cost of rent and housing are increasingly becoming a financial burden, especially for young and vulnerable people.
If there's someone from housing, otherwise we can just point to that.
If you want to go ahead, I don't think I see someone from housing.
Yes, so there is an element of housing, and one of the main things that we talk about is the diversity and affordability and the different price points for the housing. That is in the high level plan. We also talk about the Hometown for All initiative that the mayor and the council has adopted. That's something that is referenced in the general plan. Also referenced are the many other studies that have been undertaken in housing, including the Affordable Housing Strategy of 2019, and another study that was done by the Housing Division in 2022 by a consultant. So those are kind of important elements that we deal with in land use, in housing, in economic development, and also in the sustainability chapters. So pretty important things. Thanks for that question.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. If anyone had any other questions, I don't see any currently. Otherwise, if we want to go back to the next steps or maybe how people can comment.
I'll just go over next steps again, Shauna. So as I stated before, we will be at Arts in the Parks over the next couple weeks. So I believe if you are in a neighborhood where there is an Arts in the Parks event, you likely got an invitation to that. So we will have a general plan outreach table, and we will have a fun art-related activity that will also provide input for general plans. So if you're in one of those neighborhoods, please come out and join us and our parks and other colleagues throughout the city at those events. If you are in like a development community or a small business or nonprofit, we will be having very stakeholder focus groups over the next few months as well. So we'll be working to start that outreach soon. There will be one more community meeting prior to the community meeting to go over the draft in May of this year. The other spring community meeting will likely be sometime in March. Here's our contact information. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email any one of us. If we don't have the answer, we will get the answer for you from somebody. But if you have questions about the general plan or the process, please feel free to reach out. And then I think Shauna put the link to the survey in the chat. So please feel free to go take the survey. As many participants as we can get is highly encouraged. So forward it to all your friends and family that live in Tempe or work in Tempe, and to take the survey. So thank you.
Thank you. And then there was just one question that came in right after that. That can be our last as we wrap up. Asking about expanding on where issues or problems related to homelessness fall under the general plan.
Okay, so if there's no one from housing, that's also an area that we cover under housing, and also in the sustainability sections. We are very much aware there was a point in time count that was done in August. I think that showed about 500 homeless people. We got housing division within the human services, and the general plan on top of it does talk about dealing with it, and then also trying to minimize as much as we can from the goal and high level policy perspective. So that is part of the general plan very much. Any more detail, we can definitely get back to the housing and get back to you if you have other further questions.
And Robbie, I believe, and Ambika, some of the community working group, you mentioned some of the background materials that are posted online would also have more specifics on some of the elements and what's included, or is that correct? And then the website for Temp 20, it's just tempe.gov/2050 that will have a lot of that, just so you could then go into detail.
Yeah, so if you want a little more detail about what we've talked about at community working group, all the minutes from the community working group are posted online. All of the agendas and the packets that went along with it are posted online. So feel free to go dig in to previous meetings from there and reach out if you have questions. But you might get some questions that you have answered by reading those minutes as well.
Okay, so thank you again for joining us. Again, we do encourage you to take this survey. And then if you do want to revisit any of this, as I mentioned, we will have this meeting posted online here in the next few days as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.